Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the another session of Weekly Roundup. In Weekly Roundup, we cover the most important news of the last week. My name is Anuj and I will be taking today's session. In today's session, we will be covering 5 main news and 7 quick updates and 1 place in the news. The first main news is about the G7 Leaders Summit, as the Indian Prime Minister have attended the 2026 G7 Leaders Summit. Then in the next news, we will be learning about the ballistic missile defense capability, as India have demonstrated multi-layered ballistic missile defense capability. Then the next news is about the State Finance 2024-25 report that have been released by CAG. Then in the next news, we will be learning about the very hot topic, that is the MOU between Iran and the United States that have come into the effect. Then the last main news is about the district domestic product, as the PM have asked the states to come up with the district domestic product estimate. So these are the main news, and along with the main news, we also discuss the PYQs both from the prelims as well as from the mains perspective. After that, we will be covering the place in news for this week, and the place in news for this week is Netherlands. After that, we will be briefly going through the quick updates. So this is the overview about today's session, and let us start the session with the first news. So the first news is about the G7 Leaders Summit. In this news, we will be learning about G7 Summit, what are its key outcome, and a brief history about the G7 Summit. So let us start the discussion of this news, and it is related to paper 2, where syllabus talks about the important international institutions. So this is the overview of this news. Let us deep dive into this news and understand in detail about the G7 Summit. First of all, what is this G7? So basically, G7 is group of 7 countries. And when it was started in the year 1975, it was G6, then it will converted to G7, and for a brief time, it was also regarded as G8. So that we will be learning in the next slide, that why G6, G7, G8, and now again the G7. Before learning that, let us go into the background, why it was established. So let us start with the year 1973. There was a war which was going on in the Western Asian countries by the name of Yom Kippur War. And it was the war between the Israel and the Arab nations. So on one hand, it was Israel, and on the other hand, there was countries such as Egypt and the Arab nations. So what these Arab nations did at that time, because there was a backing to the Israel from the USA and the Western countries. As you might be aware that these Arab countries form the OPEC, which largely control the production of the crude oil. So what they did is, they controlled the export of crude oil. And if they control the export of the crude oil, the industries will suffer. You might be seeing that again in the year 2026, because of the Strait of Hormuz. What it leads to? It leads to inflation, it leads to recession, it leads to down in the economic activities. Similarly, at that time, there was demand of the crude oil, but there was supply constraint. So these OPEC countries constrained the supply of the crude oil, and when there is demand and when there is no supply, that will lead to inflation automatically. So to counter that, some developed countries in the year 1974 met in the France, and they established this G6 group in the starting, in France in the year 1975, and in the year 1976 Canada was also included. That lead to the G7 group of the 7 countries. So this is the brief background of the G7 group, and now we will be learning about the happening that have happened in the latest G7 summit. First of all, the development. So as you might be aware that India is continuously invited to the G7 Leaders Summit, although India is not a part of G7 countries. Okay, please be very clear that India is not a part of G7 countries, but India is continuously invited to the G7 summit. Now, the basic question, why India is continuously invited to the G7 summit, and what is the advantage for India to attend such type of summit? Okay, so India is now the 6th largest economy, have the largest population, as well as it is one of the fastest emerging country, and it can represent the global south as a leader. So that is the reason that India is continuously invited to the G7 summit, and the G7 summit countries cannot ignore India at that platform. So what India has said at the G7 summit? So Indian Prime Minister has said that world faces a shortage of trust rather than resources. So our Prime Minister has said that there is enough resources, but there is lack of trust between various countries. That is leading to wars. That is leading to vaccine hoardings. That is leading to the attacks. So that is happening due to lack of trust rather than lack of resources. Our Prime Minister have also said that world should move away from donor recipient paradigm to the partnership based on solidarity and equality. Why does our Prime Minister have said that? Because when there is a relationship, when one developed country is donor and another developing country is the recipient of the resources, then the donor country can dictate the terms. That is the issue in the donor recipient paradigm. So this is the development. Now let us understand about the G7 in detail. As we have learned that it was established in the 1975 as an informal forum for economic and the financial cooperation following the 1973 energy crisis, that we have learned in the last slide, that why this energy crisis was there. Because of the OPEC countries. They controlled the export of the crude oil. Then what are the members, or how many members are there in the G7 summit or G7 countries? There are 7 members plus the European Union. When it was started in the year 1975, in the France, there was 6 countries. Canada was not there. Okay, Canada entered the G7 in the year 1976. Okay, so at the starting there was France, there was Germany, there was Italy, there was Japan, there was United Kingdom, and there was United States. And in the year 1976, Canada was also formally included in the G7 grouping, and that its name came to G7. And European Union is also a member of the G7 countries. But the presidency does not go to European Union. That rotate between these 7 countries only. And it was expanded to G8. as Russia was also included in the year 1997. But in the year 2014, Russia annexed the Crimea. After that, Russia was removed from this grouping and now it is known as G7 only. And what is its structure? So there is no permanent secretariat and there is annual rotating presidency. In that rotating presidency does not go to European Union. Then what are the focus areas? It is focused on global economic governance as well as international security and energy policy. Now, why this group is so significant? Because it represents 40% of global GDP. These 7 countries or this group represent 40% of the global GDP and it's account only for 10% of population. So these countries are very developed as well as these countries are democratic in nature. So this is a significance of the G7 countries, as well as you might be aware about the partnership for global infrastructure and investment that is established by the G7 countries. Okay, so this is about the G7 group of 7 countries. Now let us discuss about the key outcome of the recent summit. What are the key declarations that have been adopted by the recent summit? First of all, it talk about the development finance. Okay, and what does it talk about here? It called for the reforms in the global development finance and debt management that also include the strengthening the IMF and the World Bank 3-pillar approach. So basically in this development finance, in this 3-pillar approach, what does this IMF and World Bank do? They basically bring out the structural reform, then they put the external financial support and reduce the debt servicing burden of the country. So in this summit, they have said that there is need to restructuring in this 3-pillar approach of the IMF and the World Bank. You might have noticed in the year 1991 in India have also taken step according to IMF, and there was structural reform, there was external finance support, as well as there was reduction in the debt servicing burden as well. Second, they have talked about the Ebola response. Even in one of the previous year prelims paper, UPSC have asked about the region where Ebola was there. But this time they have particularly talked about the Bundibugyo Ebola that have outbreak in the Democratic Republic Congo and Uganda. So basically this name have come from the Uganda. There is a place which is known as Bundibugyo, from where this Ebola have came, and that's why the name Bundibugyo Ebola. Then they have also talked about geopolitics and they have welcomed about the US-Iran nuclear agreement that we will be covering in another news, because that is a very important development. And also talked about a free and open Indo-Pacific. It is very important for India because India is very much concentrated in the Indo-Pacific region and our trade depend a lot on the Indo-Pacific region. Then they have talked about drug tariffing and they have announced a G7 plus ports network to combat the maritime drug trafficking. So these are the some of the key outcomes of the recent summit. Now let us look at the PYQs related to this news. So first PYQ is from the prelims paper and it is about G20 countries. So you have to solve this question, and if you don't know about the countries of the G20, please Google them and then solve this question. Question is very simple. In which one of the following group Are all the four countries members of G20? We have learned about G7 in this group, but question is about G20. So basically you have to identify that in which option all the four countries are from the G20. So first option is Argentina, Mexico, South Africa and Turkey. Then second, Australia, Canada, Malaysia and New Zealand. Third, Brazil, Iran, Saudi Arabia and Vietnam. And the fourth, Indonesia, Japan, Singapore and South Korea. These are the options. You please write down the answer in the comment section. So this was the PYQ from the prelims examination. Now let us look at the PYQ from the mains examination of the year 2025, paper 3. Basically, it is related to economy, but you can quote about the G7 summit or such type of summit as a solution for this question as a 1 point, not more than 1 point. So what was the question? Question is, what are the challenges before the Indian economy when the world is moving away from free trade and multilateralism to protectionism and bilateralism? How can these challenges be met? In the solution here, how can these challenges be met? You can write about such type of grouping where India can put forward about the thought of the free trade and the multilateralism. Okay, so that can be 1 point in the second part of this question. With this, we have completed this news and learned about the G7 group of countries as well as the recent outcomes. Now let us move to the next news and discuss the second news. Second news is about the multi-layered ballistic missile defense. And the context here is that India have demonstrated the multi-layered ballistic missile defense capabilities. And it is related to paper 3 where syllabus talks about defense modernization. In this news, we will be learning about this ballistic missile as well as about the ballistic missile defense capabilities. Then we will be solving PYQ both from the prelims as well as from the mains examination. Please listen to the news very carefully because it is a very significant development from the defense perspective. Before learning this news, let us briefly discuss about the ballistic missile and how they are different from the cruise missile. Whenever you are learning a new technology, you should be very clear with the basic aspect of that. So ballistic missile follow a, suppose this is earth and this is atmosphere. So ballistic missile follow a parabolic path. Okay, if you throw a ball in some angle, that will follow a parabolic path, that is ballistic missile. And they have rocket engine. This is very important. They have rocket engine because rocket engine have their own oxygen, whereas cruise missile follow a path which is little bit linear and they flow in the atmosphere itself, and their engine is jet engine. And jet engine uses the oxygen from the atmosphere. I hope it is clear from here what is a ballistic missile and what is a cruise missile. Now let us move to the development. So development is that after this testing, India have placed itself among a elite group of nations that include United States, Russia, China and Israel with the advanced BMD capabilities, including the defense against the ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. About intercontinental ballistic missile, we will be learning in the next slide. And India also successfully carried out a flight test of the naval anti-ship missile medium range, that this test was also conducted. Now let us understand what is this ballistic missile defense capability. Okay, if you have played basketball, you might be knowing that sometimes coaches say that defense is the best attack, and defense is also difficult. Okay, because if you have to attack, you can't go and just throw the ball towards the basket. But if you have to defend, then there should be a coordination between all the 5 players, and there should be a perfect techniques. Here as well, in ballistic missile defense, suppose a missile is coming towards our nation, then we have to analyze its path, we have to analyze its speed, we have to analyze its direction, we have to analyze the time span that where it will be at that time, then we have to strike that. Okay, you might have seen in the older serials or in the older movies where one arrow used to be cut down from the another arrow, or some funny movies where one bullet used to cut by the another bullet. That is basically ballistic missile defense capability in very loose term basically, but not directly ballistic missile defense system. But ballistic missile system is that suppose a ballistic missile is coming from a nation towards us, then we have to counter that missile by attacking that missile. Okay, you might have noticed that you might have learned about sine theta, tan theta, cos theta, cosec theta. Then you might have thought that where we are using. So here you have to use that. Okay, and then you have to analyze that from where the missile is coming, at what time it will come, from where it will come, at what distance it will go. That all calculation have to be done, and then there had to be attack on that missile. That is ballistic missile defense system. Now let us learn about the ballistic missiles first. What are ballistic missile? We have learned about ballistic missile and their difference about from the cruise missile. In the last slide, we will be reading about the ballistic missile in this slide. So basically, ballistic missiles are powered by the rocket's engine. Okay, because they go out from the atmosphere, that's why they required the oxygen. But then they follow a unpowered free falling trajectory towards their target, and its example is Agni 5. Please be very clear with the Agni 5. There was a question in the 2023 paper that we will be solving after the discussion of this news. Then what is the classification of the ballistic missile? They are classified on the basis of their range. Okay, they are classified as the short range, medium range, as well as intermediate range, and then intercontinental ballistic missile. And what is the specific range? Basically, for short range, it is less than 1000 kilometers. For the medium range, it is 1000 kilometers to 3000 kilometers. And for intermediate range, it is 3000 to 5000 kilometers. And above 5000, it is intercontinental ballistic missile. So this is a brief about the ballistic missile. Here we are not covering about cruise missile only. I have told about the working of cruise missile, and their example can be BrahMos. BrahMos is a cruise missile. An example for a ballistic missile is Agni 5. Now let us learn about the ballistic missile defense program. Okay, as in the first slide we have learned about that we have to calculate from where the missile is coming, then we have to track its location, its speed, and then we have to attack. For that, what we require? We require advanced networks of radars, command centers, and interceptor missile designed to detect, track, and destroy the incoming ballistic missile. So there should be radars to calculate the direction as well as the speed of the incoming ballistic missile. There should be command center from from where the radar will be sending the information, and there should be interceptor missile that will track and destroy the incoming ballistic missile. And this mission was basically initiated in the 1999 by the DRDO, and in the response to the Pakistan nuclear test as well as the Chinese assertiveness. Okay, and it is a two-tier defense system. We have seen that a ballistic missile go out from the atmosphere as well. If we are destroying a ballistic missile outside the atmosphere, it will be known as the exo-atmosphere. That means it is outside the Earth atmosphere. And if we are destroying within the Earth atmosphere, it will be known as the endo-atmospheric ballistic missile defense system. So there is two-tier defense. Okay. Now let us learn about the phases of it. First phase included the Prithvi defense vehicle. It is an advanced defense interceptor to counter the short and medium range ballistic missile that have a range of 2000 kilometers. Okay. Then there was phase 2. It features AD1 and AD2 interceptor which have a range of 5000 kilometers. The incoming ballistic missile have a range of 5000 kilometers. So AD1 is a long range interceptor missile designed for both low exo-atmospheric and endo-atmospheric interception, basically inside the atmosphere as well as outside the atmosphere. Then AD2 missile is meant to intercept the intermediate range ballistic missile that have a range of 3000 to 5500 kilometers. Then there is another phase. It is in development, that is ADAH and ADAM interceptor. In ADAH, that is anti-hypersonic. What is hypersonic? When a missile have a speed 5 times the speed of the sound, that is known as hypersonic. And what is the speed of the sound? 343 meters per second. When a missile have a speed 5 times than the speed of the sound, that is known as hypersonic missile. And here in the ADAH, we are developing anti-hypersonic defense system. That means that the hypersonic glide vehicles which travels above Mach 5, that is the 5 times the speed of the sound, and changes their trajectory mid-flight to dodge the interceptions. So they can change their direction as well. So we are developing a defense system so that we can track down and destroy even the hypersonic missiles, incoming missiles. Then another ADAM, that is anti-missile, that missile carrying multiple independently targeted re-entry vehicles. What does it mean? Basically, suppose a missile is coming and it has nuclear head. When it will come to a country, it will go to the different location. That is multiple independently targetable re-entry. That means that when the ballistic missile will re-enter into an atmosphere, it will divide itself and target at the multiple location. So for that, we are also developing the defense system. So this was all in this news. Now let us solve the PYQ related to this news. First PYQ is from the prelims 2023 year paper, and this question is solvable from our discussion. Okay, so please try to solve this question and write the answer in the comment section. I will read the question for you. Question is, consider the following statements. Statement 1, ballistic missiles are jet propelled at subsonic speed throughout their flight, while cruise missiles are rocket powered only in the initial phase of the flight. We have discussed this in detail in the first slide itself. Then the second statement is that Agni 5 is a medium range supersonic cruise missile. We have discussed about the example of the ballistic missile as well as the cruise missile. So here it is given that Agni 5 is a medium range supersonic cruise missile, while BrahMos is a solid fuel intercontinental ballistic missile. So you have to answer which of the following statement, which of the statement given above is or are correct. Option A is 1 only, B 2 only, C both 1 and 2, and D neither 1 nor 2. So please write down the answer for this PYQ in the comment section. Let us look at the another PYQ from the mains examination of the year 2021. Question is not related to our discussion. It is to show that what kind of questions are coming from defense technology, so that you can prepare accordingly for the mains examination from this news. So question here is that how is the S-400 air defense system technically superior to the other system presently available in the world? So question in the year 2021 was about S-400 air defense system. So you have to write down about that defense system and how it is superior to the other air defense system of the world, such as THAAD of the USA or Iron Dome of the Israel. Okay, that was the question at that time. Okay, so with this we have completed the second news and learned about the ballistic missile as well as the ballistic missile defense capability of India. Now let us move to the next news, and the next news is about the state finances and particularly about the CAG report of 2024-25. It is related to paper 3. In this news we will be learning about the state finances, constraint on the state finances, and what are the key highlights which are given by the CAG. And whenever you are reading a news related to paper 3, especially economic development, you have to look for the data as well as the example to make your answer very specific in the mains paper. Let us discuss this news. So first of all, before discussing this news, let us look at the aspects which are essential to examine the financial condition of a state. You have to look at the 3 aspects of a state. One is capital outlay. What does capital outlay means? That how much fund a state is allocating for creation of capital. That is very important. The larger amount of capital outlay in a expenditure, the better the financial condition of that state. Second aspect is the committed expenditure. What is this committed expenditure? Suppose a state is earning 100 rupees, but in out of those 100 rupees, it has to pay a committed amount, for example 80 for salaries, for pension, for interest. Then it is left only with 20 rupees for other development. So higher the committed expenditure, the worse the condition of a state. In the recent past, you might have seen a news related to Kerala, where Kerala now that the Kerala committed expenditure is very high. That is a point of concern. Okay. Then third aspect is interest payment. If a state have the higher interest payment, that will be under the highest burden or highest debt. That is also a aspect of the state finances. So whenever you want to check the state finances of a particular state, it might be Uttar Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat or any other state, please check at the three aspects: capital outlay of the expenditure, committed expenditure and the interest payment. With this, let us start the news. So this report has provided a consolidated fiscal overview of all the 28 states, enabling an interstate and intertemporal analysis over 10 years from the year 2015-16 to 2024-25. So this is given in this report. Now let us look at the various highlights which have been provided by the report. First, the report talk about the public debt of the state. When you talk about the public debt of the state, you should be very clear that state cannot issue treasury bills. On this information, UPSC have asked a question in the prelims examination that state cannot issue treasury bills. They can issue the state development loans, but not treasury bills. Treasury bills can be issued only by the central government, not by the state government. Okay, so first point, that the outstanding combined public debt have stood at the 75.52 lakh crore rupees. Okay, that is very high. And in public debt receipt constituted over 99% of total capital receipt, that indicate a heavy dependence on borrowing from financial expenditure. Whenever you talk about receipt, there are two types of receipt. One is capital receipt and another one is revenue receipt. In capital receipt, you have the disinvestment from the public sectors or public sector units, you have recovery of loans, and you have the public debt as well. So in this report, it has given that in the capital receipt, the 99% is borrowing. That is, that indicate a very high dependence on borrowing for the financial expenditure. In revenue receipt, you have taxes, you have interest, you have dividend from the PSUs, that is in the revenue receipt. Please be very clear about capital receipt and revenue receipt. Basically, revenue receipt are recurring and capital receipt are non-recurring. So that is a basic difference. So that is the first point. Second, that the public debt include the internal debt and the loans and advance from the union government. That we are very clear that the public debt include the internal debt and the loans and advance from the union government. Then second point is about the fiscal deficit. What is fiscal deficit? Okay, in the year 2025, there was two questions about fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit is total expenditure minus total receipt. That basically means the borrowings. Okay, so based on this simple formula, there was two questions in the prelims examination of 2025. So here the report is saying that as against the 15th Finance Commission benchmark of 3% of state GDP, 18 states have recorded the fiscal deficit above the prescribed threshold, and the prescribed threshold is the 3% of the state gross GDP. But the 18 states have crossed that threshold. That means in the later stage they have to pay back, and there will be more burden on the upcoming population. The other highlights from the reports are there is low capital expenditure. When we were discussing about a finance of the state in the first slide, we were talking about the capital expenditure by a state. So here the report is saying that the revenue expenditure constituted 83.41. That means the capital expenditure was only 16.59, and it is the average of 28 state. In some state it is way below than 16.59. So basically states are consuming whatever the income is coming and not allocating money for the capital creation. That is a very big issue. Then share in the union taxes and duties. So basically the report is saying that the share of the states in the devolution of taxes and duties as percentage have increased from 27% to 31% in the last 10 years. So that shows that there is higher dependence of the state on the union government. That is also not a good sign. And lastly, the report talks about the subsidies. Okay, subsidies are provided by the state government, and the report is saying that the subsidy expenditure has remained largely in the range of 8 to 10% of the total revenue of expenditure of all state combined, and maximum subsidy is going to agriculture and the energy. These are the key highlights from the recent CAG report about the state finances. Now let us learn about the constraint on the state fiscal capacity. What are the constraints on the state fiscal capacity? First of all, there is limited fiscal autonomy, and basically after the GST, there is more power towards the center, as the states have given their basic power on some of the indirect taxes that can be concluded or that can come under the GST. And when we talk about the direct taxes, the large portion of direct taxes is with the central government. There are very few taxes that are direct with the state government, such as professional tax or the agriculture tax. Then there is subsidy burden. In the last slide we have seen that there is 8 to 10% subsidy in the expenditure, and this subsidy burden is increasing. You might be hearing about the free electricity, free bus ride, this free, that is increasing the subsidy burden for the state, and that is coming, or that is further increasing the constraint on the state's fiscal capacity. So high subsidy expenditure constrain the fiscal space available for the capital formation and development expenditure. And lastly, it is high committed expenditure. The committed expenditure, as we have learned in the first slide, is the expenditure that state have to bear in any situation, and committed expenditure include the salaries, pension, interest and other aspect. Basically it includes the salaries, pension and interest. So there is high committed expenditure which is leaving the state with a very few capital. Okay, so these are the constraints on the state fiscal capacity. Now let us look at the PYQs related to this news. First PYQ is from the prelims examination of the 2025, and the question is, consider the following statement. 1. The capital receipt create a liability or cause a reduction in the asset of the government. This is a direct statement and this is a correct statement. Second, borrowings and disinvestment are capital receipt. Okay, that we have seen that when we were learning about the capital receipt and the revenue receipt. This is also a correct statement. Third statement is little bit tricky, that we will be learning here, that interest received on loans create a liability of the government. Suppose you is there, that means you have given money to your friend F and he or she is giving interest to you. So that loan is asset for you or liability? Okay, you are receiving interest on a loan given by you to friend F. So in that scenario, that is asset for you, not liability. Okay, so interest received on loan create a liability, not it does not create a liability, it create a asset for the government. So third statement is not correct. Answer would be A, 1 and 2 only. Now let us discuss one more PYQ from the year 2021. Question is very simple. Question is very straightforward. Okay, so the question is distinguish between the capital budget and the revenue budget. Explain the component of both of these budgets. Very simple question. We have discussed about the capital receipt or capital budget and the revenue budget. Basically, we have discussed only about the receipt, capital receipt and the revenue receipt. But the question is also asking about the capital expenditure and revenue expenditure. That you have to explain in this question. With this, we have learned about the latest CAG report on the state finances. With this, we have completed this news, and now let us move to the next news. The next news is about the MOU between the Iran and United States that have came into effect, and it is related to paper 2, where syllabus talks about effect of policies and politics of developed and developing countries on the India's interest. Okay, so we will be basically learning about this MOU, but you should also infer how it will impact India, because if there is a question in the mains examination, it will connect with the India. Okay, let us discuss this news in detail. First of all, the development. So 14-point MOU has been signed between United States of America and Islamic Republic of Iran. Was signed virtually, and it was signed virtually as in the Palace of Versailles, where the Treaty of Versailles in 1919 was signed between Germany and the Allied after the First World War. And some historians say that this treaty was responsible for the Second World War. And this palace is also known as venue of bad treaty. I don't know who have recommended to the President of USA to sign this treaty in this palace, because according to Trump, he might be signing the greatest treaty ever known to the humankind. In his own words, he might be saying that I have signed a treaty that has been never signed by anyone. But this place, that is Palace of Versailles, is not known for good treaties. Basically, when the first treaty here was signed, that was the after the World War, that treaty was basically one of the reason for the Second World War, because in that treaty there was a lot of humiliation for the Germany that has given rise to the Adolf Hitler, and that has given rise to the Second World War. Okay, basically this treaty have been signed, and it is very advantageous to India. Why it is advantageous to India? That we will be learning in the upcoming slides. Whenever you are reading most of the news from the international relation perspective, please also look at their impact on the India or the Indian interest. Okay, if there will be a question in the UPSC examination, especially in mains, that question will connect the development with the Indian interest. Okay, so you should be ready beforehand. So here, what are the key highlights of the agreement? First of all, it talk about a permanent ceasefire. Okay, so it says that there will be immediate and lasting and to military operation on all front, and that also include the Lebanon. And in Lebanon, what is going on in Lebanon? Israel is attacking. Where is Lebanon? Lebanon is north of the Israel. And there is a concern that US have not consulted Israel before signing of this treaty, but have included the Lebanon in this treaty. That is a concern, and we will see in the future how Israel will look after this treaty. Second, respect for the internal affairs. Okay, so US and Iran will respect each other territorial integrity and avoid interference in the internal affairs. But when US have attacked the Iran in February, US have said, not US, basically the President Trump have said that we will change the regime. But what is the point in the MOU? That there will be no interference in the internal affairs of the Iran or vice versa. Then there will be 60-day negotiation window. So these are the MOUs, and then there will be a final deal, and for that there is a 60-day negotiation window. So a final agreement is to be negotiated within 60 days, and this timeline of 60 days can be extended mutually. Then there will be end of blockade. This is very important for India. India, as well as the other Asian countries such as Japan, China, are very much dependent on Strait of Hormuz for their energy security. And India is not only dependent for energy security, but also dependent for the fertilizers. And we are there in the Kharif season. Kharif season is when monsoon comes to India. And why this Kharif season is so significant for India? Because we grow a lot of crops in Kharif season. When we will grow a lot of crop, we will require a lot of fertilizers. And when there will be an end of blockade, we will be getting that fertilizers. So we are not only benefiting from this end of blockade for our energy security, but also we will be benefited for getting the fertilizers. So the US have said that they will gradually lift its naval blockade and restriction on the Iranian ports within the 30 days. They will move back to the earlier position before the attack. Then about the Strait of Hormuz reopened, so that when there will be end of blockade, the Strait of Hormuz will be reopened, and Iran will facilitate the free and safe commercial navigation through the strait. So there will be no charges on the ships. So when there will be no charges, when there will be no attack, so automatically the trade in this route will become cheap, as well as the insurance will come down, because when there was threat of attack, the insurance money was going high, and the rate or the trade was becoming very costly. So this will also benefit India. Then the next point is about the reconstruction plan. Okay, so this is a very tricky statement given by the US administration, because they are saying that there will be a minimum $300 billion economic development and the reconstruction in the Iran, but they are not saying that from where this 300 billion rupees or dollars will come from. Okay, so that is not clear, that from where this money will come. That is a big question. They are saying that there will be a development and this much amount of money will go, but from where that money will come, they are not clear about that. Then they are talking about sanction relief. Okay, so they are saying that US commit to ending the economic sanction which was put down by the US as well as by the UN Security Council. So that will also benefit India, as India will be able to take cheap oil, as well as India will also start the Chabhar port. So there is lot of light or lot of positive for India in this peace deal. Then they have also talked about the no nuclear weapon. So Iran have agreed to not to develop or acquire the nuclear weapon, and both the sides have agreed that Iran will dismantle the enriched uranium. So in the year 2023, there was a report by IAEA that Iran have enriched its uranium up to 60%. Okay, so basically for producing electricity, 3 to 5% of enriched uranium is required, and for producing atomic bomb, more than 90% of enrichment of uranium is required. So based on this information, UPSC have asked a question in the year 2023 prelims paper that we will be solving after this news. Then there is assurance of the waivers. So for the export of the Iranian crude oil, petroleum products and derivatives, and all associated service, including the banking, transaction, insurance, transportation, etc. So there will be waivers from the US side. And lastly, monitoring and the UN backing. So final deal, which has to be signed after the 60 days, will be endorsed by UN, and that will be bindings. So these are the major outcomes of the UN and Iran, sorry, not UN, but the US and Iran deal. Let us look at the PYQ from the year 2023 paper. Question is, consider the following statement. Statement 1, India, despite having uranium deposit, depends on coal for most of its electricity production. First statement. Second statement, uranium enriched to an extent of at least 60% is required for the production of electricity. So why this specific 60% was given in the paper? Because it was there in the news that Iran have enriched its uranium up to 60%, whereas for producing electricity only 3 to 5% of enriched uranium is required. So that was there in the news. So that make the second statement as incorrect. And if in statement type question one statement is incorrect, then you will come down to the answer. That means statement 2 is incorrect and C is the answer. That statement 1 is correct, but statement 2 is incorrect. With this, we have completed this news. Now let us discuss the last main news for today. The last main news is regarding the district domestic product, and the context in this news is that the Prime Minister have asked the states to come up with the district domestic product estimate, and it is also related to paper 3 where syllabus talks about economic development. In this news we will be learning about the district domestic product and why there is need for district domestic product. Okay, let us understand this news. Before understanding about the district domestic product, let us understand about GDP, gross domestic product. What is GDP? Basically, it is the monetary value. This term monetary value is very important. Monetary value of all the product and services in a particular area for a particular time frame. I will repeat the definition again. GDP is the monetary value of all the products and the services in a particular area for a particular time. And basically this particular time is 1 year and particular area is a country. So GDP, we basically, when we talk about GDP, we talk about the GDP of a country. But there are some lacunas in GDP. Suppose we are showing that Indian GDP is growing at an excellent pace of 7 to 8%. Can you say that Punjab, Bihar and Tamil Nadu are growing at the same pace? We cannot say that. Then if we also know about the GDP of the state and their growth rate, then can we say that all the districts of that state are growing at the same pace? For example, in a state of Maharashtra, can Mumbai grow at the same pace as the Bid or Latur? Latur and Bid will be growing at a very slow pace, but districts such as Thane or Pune or Mumbai will be growing at a very fast pace. So there is requirement of district domestic product. So you should be very clear about GDP before understanding of this news. So I hope you are very clear with the definition of GDP. Now let us come back to the development. So basically a district domestic product represent the total value of all goods and services produced within a geographical boundaries of a district for a specific time frame. When we were discussing about GDP, we were basically talking about a country. So here the definition is almost same, but the boundaries are of a district. Okay, so you might be from any district. So all the product, the monetary value of the products and services from your district is basically district domestic product, and it serves as a disaggregated counterpart to the gross state domestic product at state level and GDP at the national level, which provide the granular insight into the local economic structure and performance of the districts. Okay, so basically it will provide better structure and with the better data about the performance of a district. Now let us move forward and understand about the methodology. So it basically follows two approach. First, income originating. Second, income occurring. Suppose I am from a district, for example, LB Nagar in Hyderabad, and I am earning some money in Delhi. So if I want to calculate my income in Hyderabad, that will be income occurring. That means it measures the income received by a normal resident of a district, which also include the income originated outside the region. Basically, it is GNP, gross national product, GNP. And income originating, it means measurement corresponding to the income originate within the reference to the factor of production located within a district. So basically, it means suppose एक district है, अगर वहीं पे प्रोडक्शन हो रहा है और वहीं पे इनकम आ रही है, दैट मीन्स इनकम ओरिजिनेटिंग. एंड सेकेंड, इनकम अकरिंग मीन्स कहीं भी प्रोडक्शन हो रहा है, अगर मैं उस डिस्ट्रिक्ट का हूं तो उस डिस्ट्रिक्ट में अगर जो इनकम आएगी दैट विल कॉल्ड एज इनकम अकरिंग. दैट इज द बेसिक डिफरेंस इन इनकम ओरिजिनेटिंग एंड इनकम अकरिंग. देन देयर आर थ्री एस्टिमेशन अप्रोच. वन इज टॉप डाउन अप्रोच. In top down approach, the state level aggregates are first estimated and then distributed among the districts using the suitable indicators. So a state calculate their value of their products and then they divide it with the various districts by using a suitable indicator, and most than often the indicator used is population, and it does not provide a clear picture. Then the second approach is bottom up approach, that is direct estimation of the district level by the collecting data from household enterprises establishment. So basically it is calculating on the ground. Then there is mixed approach, that is the combination of top down and the bottom up method. And what is the status presently? The status is that currently 26 state and UTs are preparing the DDP estimate, but they are mainly using the top-down approach, where they calculate the GDP of the state and then they divide it with this within the districts by using a indicator, and that indicator mostly is the population of that district. So that does not provide a clear picture. So we required calculation of DPP by using the bottom up approach. Now let us move to the next slide and discuss about the need of the district domestic product. Why we need the district domestic product calculation? First, identifying the intra-state disparities. It is very clear that all the districts of a state are not growing at the same pace, and there is a lot of variation in the growth of the various districts. So in Uttar Pradesh, for example, a district such as Lakhimpur Kheri will not be developing as a district in Gautam Budh Nagar. Then in a state of Maharashtra, the Mumbai, Thane and Pune contribute over half of the Maharashtra's output. Let us talk about Karnataka here. It is a very interesting case. In Karnataka, about 38% of its GDP is contributed by a single district. And the name of the district, you all can guess that district, that is Bengaluru. What about the all other districts of the Karnataka? So it can remove the interstate disparity, basically it can identify. Then targeted planning. So when we will be knowing that this district is not growing at that pace, or there is lacunas in the growth of that district, then there can be a targeted planning that will allow programs tailored to the local bottlenecks and the opportunities. Then third, it will capture the informal economy. Basically, when we will be doing the bottom-up approach, not the top-down approach. In top-down approach, it was found out in a pilot study that it underestimated the unincorporated manufacturing gross value from 57% to 148%. So basically, in top-down approach, the informal sector is mostly left behind. And in India, 90% of workers are working in informal sector. Then there is effective financial or fiscal devolution that will lead to better targeted fiscal transfer by finance commission and state with measurable local impact. That what are the impact by the transfer of money. Then there will be responsiveness to the local shocks, because DDP data will capture the district level impact of drought, factory closures and other impact of on the districts, that will enable the timely and targeted policy response. So these 5 things that we have learned are, that's why we need the district domestic product. So with this we have completed this news. Now let us look at the questions related to GDP. So in prelims exams as well, there are many questions which are related to GDP, but here I am focusing more on the mains exam questions. Okay, so first question is from the year 2020. Question is, define potential GDP and explains its determinant. Then what are the factors that have been inhibiting India from realizing its potential GDP? So basically you have to define potential GDP and what are its determinant and what is inhibiting India for realizing its potential GDP, and then in conclusion you have to write a way forward to achieve that, what can be done to achieve potential GDP by India. Then one more question from the year 2021. It is a very specific question related to GDP. Question is, explain the difference between computing methodology of India's gross domestic product before the year 2015 and after the year 2015. So here in the introduction you can define the GDP, then you will be writing about the difference between the computing methodology of GDP before 2015 and after the year 2015 in the body, then you can conclude accordingly. So with this we have completed the place in main news for today. Let us discuss the place in news for today, and place in news for today is Netherlands, and the context is that the 4th India-Netherlands cyber dialogues have held in New Delhi. The context is not that important. In such type of news, we focus on the features of a country. So basically where this country is located, it is located in the Western Europe. Okay, and when you read about a country, please look at its neighboring countries as well. North, south, east and west. So its land boundaries are Germany in the east and Belgium in the south, and the maritime boundary is North Sea, that is part of Atlantic Ocean in the north and west. Okay, and when you will be learning about Netherlands, you will be very surprised to know that Netherlands is a country where the land is below the water about 1/3 of its area. So they have claimed the land not only from the oceans but also from the rivers. And this country is also known for riding the bicycles. There are more bicycles than the persons, and there are more ways for the highways for the bicycles than the cars. It's a very beautiful country, and it is also known for tulip cultivation as well, and it was the first country which have recognized the same-sex marriage. Then the International Court of Justice and International Criminal Courts are situated in Hague, and you should be aware that International Court of Justice is under UN, and its geography is predominantly characterized by its low-lying terrain, which is nearly 1/3 of its land is situated below the sea level. So they have claimed the land from the ocean as well as from the rivers. Okay, and there is a lot of cultivation of tulips, and it is a very beautiful country. With this, we have completed this place in news. Now let us discuss the quick update. The first quick update is about drop shipping. Why we are doing drop shipping today? Because this year prelims examination, there was a direct question related to drop shipping. Okay, whenever you read in news, please connect this news with the PYQ both from the prelims as well as from the mains. Then you will understand in a better way that on what areas you have to focus from the perspective of a prelims or the mains examination. So context for this news is that the drop shipping faces threat from the creation of entire shopfront and e-commerce website in minutes with cheap domain and a few AI coding prompts. So when you will be scrolling a page in Instagram or Facebook, you will come across a very beautiful product. Then you will buy that product. Basically, that product will be there with some other person, but some person will develop the coding or develop the front page. Then you will be buying that product on their website. That is basically the meaning of drop shipping. Now let us understand in detail what is drop shipping. It is a e-commerce business model where the seller does not keep product in stock. So suppose Amazon is the seller, so it does not keep the product in the stock. So the seller receive customer orders and forward them to a manufacturer, wholesaler or suppliers. Then that manufacturer, wholesaler or supplier will provide that product. That product is not there with the e-commerce. Okay, so the supplier stores, pack and ship the product directly to the customers, and the drop shippers act as a middleman between the buyers and the actual sellers. Okay, there was a case, I think in the year 2022 or 23 on one of the e-commerce where they have said that there was fake products on your platform. So where that e-commerce have clarified in the code that we act as a intermediate only, and we don't argue or we don't specify about the genuineness of a product. Okay, that was a case. So one or more intermediaries may exist between the customer and the original producers. And what are the advantages of drop shipping? Basically, it's low startup cost, no inventory management and minimal warehousing requirement. These are the advantages with the drop shipping. With this, we have completed the first quick update. Now let us move to the next quick update. The next quick update is basically about GI tags. The context of this news is the GI tag product from the Jharkhand. So Jharkhand Bagia silk, Kuchai silk, Munda jewelry and bamboo craft have received the geographical indication tag. So when a product receive a GI tag, that means that have some speciality that are connected with a specific location, and there are many GI tag products in India such as Kolhapuri chappals and the other products as well. So we will be learning about the products which are provided with the GI tag recently. One is Bhagia silk, and it is a traditional hand spun silk textile of Santhal Pargana, and it is woven mainly by the Santhal tribal women. So there can be a question that Bhagia silk are connected with which tribe. Then Kuchai silk, they are produced by Kuchai, that is Saraikela Karswan district from Tasar silk, that is also called as Tusar silk, and they are famous for its natural golden sheen and high durability. Then there is Munda jewelry, that is a traditional jewelry of the Munda tribes and crafted mainly from the silver, brass and bead. Then the Jharkhand bamboo craft. Okay, so they are traditional bamboo handicraft made by the rural and tribal artisan using the locally available resources. So these four products are provided with the GI tags from the Jharkhand. With this, we have completed the second quick update. Now, let us move to the third quick update. The third quick update is about the Siom River. The context is that the Union Environment Ministry Expert Appraisal Committee have deferred a proposal of 1000 megawatt dam on the Siom River due to the concern related to environmental flow. What is environmental flow? Basically, the flow required to maintain the ecology of a river, that is environmental flow. So the report have highlighted, or the expert appraisal committee have highlighted, that it will impact the environmental flow of Siom River. In this news, we will be learning about Siom River. So basically, it's originate near India-China border and flows west to east within the Arunachal Pradesh, and it is a right bank tributary to the Brahmaputra River, where in the Arunachal Pradesh, the Brahmaputra River is known as Siang River. It's a right bank tributary, and there are many rapids on the Siom River. That's why it is also known for its rafting. Okay, many people, enthusiast people, go to this river for rafting and kayaking. Okay, with this, we have completed this news. Now let us move to the next quick update. The next quick update is about the dancing girl of Mohenjo-daro. In the year 2025 or 24 prelims, the UPSC have asked about this dancing girl of Mohenjo-daro, and the context here is that the NCERT has taken the decision to restore the original image of the Harappan dancing girl in its textbook. I hope you have read about that controversy. That what was the controversy? So basically, they have said that they will restore the original image of the Harappan dancing girl in its textbook. So we will be learning about the dancing girl here. So it is a famous bronze figurine from the ancient city of Mohenjo-daro, and it belongs to the Harappan, that is also known as Indus Valley civilization, and it was discovered in the year 1926 during the excavation led by John Marshall. And this figure is 10.8 centimeter tall, and it is there in the National Museum in Delhi. And if you are in Delhi and you are preparing for UPSC, and please take out some time and visit this National Museum, which is in Delhi. It is very nearby to the India Gate. It would hardly take 15 to 20 minutes by the metro, and it will take around one day to look after the every artifact which is there in there. But if you are reading ancient India and you are reading the art and culture, you will be very clear about things which are there. They are there. Kusana's museum, the Kusana's figures are there, various figures are there, and you will be very clear with the concepts as well. So please do visit this National Museum in Delhi if you have time and you are staying in Delhi. And it is created using the lost wax casting technique. What is this lost wax casting technique? Basically, there was a creation of the figure by the wax, and that was kept between a some metal or some figure, then that wax was melted, and at that place there was put down of some bronze or some other material. Okay, so with this we have completed this quick update. Now let us move to the next quick update, and next quick update is brain eating amoeba. Okay, I hope you might have drawn this figure when you were reading your 8th or 9th class. This is amoeba. Okay, and the context here is that the Kerala has seen a surge in brain eating amoeba causes mainly due to Acantha amoeba, a free living amoeba found mainly in contaminated water. So this amoeba is found in the contaminated water, contaminated fresh water. It is not found in the sea water. It is found in the contaminated fresh water. And when someone jump into that water, that amoeba goes into the nose, and nose is connected with the brain because you have to sense smell, and you have to, if you are sensing smell, that means your nose is connected to the brain, and through that sensor that amoeba goes to the brain. Okay, so here we will be learning about that brain eating amoeba. So it is a free living single celled amoeba found in warm freshwater bodies such as lakes, river, hot spring and soil, and it can enter the body through the nose, skin, inhalation, and can infect the brain. And it is why it is called brain eating amoeba. Basically it destroys the brain cell, that's why it's known as brain eating amoeba. And it is very rare, but it is very fatal. Okay, that is a speciality of this brain eating amoeba. Now let us move to the next quick update. The next quick update is about ground level ozone, and the context is that the ground level ozone pollution is emerging as the major public health challenge in Delhi. Okay, again, if you are staying in Delhi, you might have seen the increase in the exposure to the ozone, and that will be creating a irritation. Okay, so basically there are two type of ozone. One is the good ozone that is there in stratosphere, that protect us from the harmful UV rays of the sun, and one is the ozone in the troposphere. Basically that is the ground level ozone, and that is bad ozone. Okay, so it is a secondary air pollutant formed by the reaction between nitrogen oxide and volatile organic compound in the presence of sunlight. In one of the UPSC prelims examination, they have asked about the secondary pollution. So a pollution which is directly emitted in the atmosphere, that is primary pollution. A secondary pollution is the pollution which is not directly emitted into the atmosphere, but it is produced when two other pollutant combine with each other. Okay, and it is found in troposphere, that is lower atmospheric layer, and it is a major precursor sources that include the vehicle industries and thermal power plants, and it peaks during summers due to the intense solar radiation, as the radiation from the sunlight is required for the reaction between the nitrogen oxide and volatile organic compound, and it causes the respiratory ailment and crop damage as well as photochemical smoke. Okay, now let us move to the next quick update and the last quick update for today. And the last quick update is about the first Constitutional Amendment Act, and the context here is that the 2026 marks the 75th year of passage of the first Constitutional Amendment Act 1951, which have amended the Constitution for the first time. By this Constitution amendment, there was changes in the freedom of speech. Article 19, there was expansion of Article 19.2 to allow the state to impose a reasonable restriction on free speech on the ground of specifically public order and friendly relation with the foreign state. So you might be aware that the Article 19 which provide for various rights such as freedom to speech and expression, those rights are not absolute. There are some reasonable restriction, and by the First Amendment Act there was increase in the reasonable restriction, and state imposed a reasonable restriction on free speech on the grounds such as public order and friendly relations with neighbor. Then there was affirmative action and equality in the Article 14, basically 14, Article 15, sorry, basically 15 subclause 4. It enabled the insertion of Article 15(4) that allow the state to make the special provision for the advancement of the social and educationally backward classes. And lastly, it introduced the ninth schedule that created a unique constitutional mechanism to protect the land reform law from being challenged or struck down by the courts, because at that time right to property was a fundamental right. So they have provided that a ninth schedule, whatever there will be in the ninth schedule, that cannot be struck down by the courts, but that was reversed. And the year I think 2006 or 2007, that Supreme Court has said that even if something is there in the ninth schedule and that is against the basic doctrine, that will be struck down. So with this we have completed the today's weekly roundup session, and if you want to read further the current affairs, the monthly current affairs or the other current affairs, and you want to solve the smart quizzes, you can visit the digital current affairs website of us. Thank you and all the best for your preparation.